Hello, Jason.
Oh, there we go.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. So let me do the intro. This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we interview creative people from around the world. And we have Jason Primrose on the line, and you're finishing out a week that we've kind of gone full circle. We talked to Jessica Matthews on Monday, and then we yesterday we talked to a violinist from Australia, a classical violinist. We're ending the week with an author.
Oh, amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
I love classical music, so I will have to listen to that episode.
Yeah, we're trying to balance out talking to all types of creative people. There's always been a focus on music, so bringing an author, you're the maybe the second author we've talked to in the last 3 years. Um, but it's great to have somebody like yourself on the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Sorry, I had to. Yeah, I'm excited. I've done a few, and I love meeting new people and chatting, and we got to chat a little bit over text and over the phone before this, so this is awesome.
So, like your byline on your bio is you're a chief creative officer of the Cage Creative, right? Is
Yeah,
that
yeah,
and
yeah.
you're an author? Yeah,
Yep, yep.
go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, it's funny because I feel like this term like multi-hyphenate, I kind of have to play in multiple lanes to live the life I want.
Yeah. Well, I get it. I try. I mean, I'm kind of bridging the gap between being a broadcaster and a musician myself, and I do some other things. So I'm kind of hyphenated. My name's hyphenated in itself.
Yeah, yeah.
um, but you've got a multi hyphenated career. I mean, you started as a creative strategist for brands like NIVEA and Nike and Freeform, and now you're doing like sci-fi Lost Children of Andromeda series seems like in the vein of like Roddenberry, of Ben Bova, Rod Serling, some of the, Isaac Asimov, Ray Bradbury. And that's really cool because I'm African American. I've been a big fan of comic books and sci-fi, but you don't often see yourself represented in that area as an African American fan of that genre.
Yeah, that's how I felt a lot. And it's really funny because I didn't really realize how deep like comic book fandom ran in the Black community until I went to Comic-Con 2 or 3, I think it was 3 years ago, and like everyone's a huge fan, especially in like the hip hop community. People were huge fans of comic books, and I always loved comics growing up, and I also loved reading novels, science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
I read things a little bit more, I would say, mainstream,
Mm-hmm.
like a little bit more accessible
Yeah.
um, than like than Ray Bradbury or
Isaac.
Isaac Asimov,
Yeah.
for example. But I also didn't realize I didn't see myself, and didn't realize I didn't see myself until I got older, and was crafting my own stories and was thinking, well, who is this character and what's their perspective and what's their experience, and like, can it be mine, or is that not allowed?
Yeah. That was always. I mean, I was a big fan of Jack Kirby because I
Mm-hmm.
was a Marvel head, and the one
Mm-hmm.
cool thing about Kirby is he introduced Black Panther, one of the first Black superheroes. He created the Falcon, another Black superhero, and he
Mm-hmm.
always had a very positive image, a more positive image than I'd ever seen. I mean, the whole idea of Wakanda, I mean, Kirby created that.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that was in the 60s. I mean, that was like 67, 68. He came up with
yeah.
those ideas. And, he's kind of looking at what's going on with the Black Panthers, and he decided to be somewhat radical and say, well, I'm going to create a superhero called Black Panther and have this fanciful, African country where Wakanda is like at the height of technology. Black Panther's people had the same capabilities of Reed Richards,
Mm-hmm.
who was like,
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be one of the smartest people in the world. And they had this African country, they had similar capabilities. And that was like
Yeah.
in 68. So as a young Black kid, I was like, wow, that's cool. and because I was always looking at Spock, like Leonard Nimoy, that I was always drawn to that, and I was like, well, where's my Spock,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
found them in the comics. I found characters in the comic books that actually were there. There weren't a lot of them, but there started to be like Luke Cage and the Black Goliath. There started to be some black characters started showing up in the late 60s, early 70s. So that's interesting. But we haven't been represented as much as we should be.
Yeah. 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 And I think in literature, it's an interesting, I mean, that was part of the importance, I think, of having a visual aesthetic for the book series.
Mm-hmm.
Like traditionally, you may not see that much artwork come out of a literature property, but I thought it was really important because we live in such a visual world, right? We have Pinterest, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, and like images and videos do wildly better than text. So
is it kind of somewhat of a graphic novel project too?
There are pictures inside the novel. It's not full color, but they're kind of black and whites, grayscale. And then in the ebook version, it's supposed to be color. And so I think it was allowing people to visually know that they were represented, and then kind of dig into the text and figure out which
how
character.
you were able to bring it to Comic-Con because you had that graphical content.
Well, I actually went to Comic-Con with a former job. That was actually a really unbelievable experience because I definitely got to do Comic-Con. Like, I probably won't be able to do again for a little while, but I was working for a celebrity, and they were releasing a graphic novel, and I was on the social team for that.
Oh, okay.
And so we did we got to do all kinds of crazy things. It was like the best, the coolest experience of my entire life.
The Comic-Con now has got this big integration with like movies and TV that when I went in the 70s, like you could actually talk to Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and some.
Oh my gosh!
You actually could go to like a Holiday Inn in like Springfield, Massachusetts, and Jack Kirby and Stan Lee would be there, and maybe they'd be like 300 or 400 kids with 20, 30 comic books in their hand trying to get Jack Kirby to sign them, and and that's what it was. And now it's become video game companies and TV companies and movie companies and like actors showing up, but that's not what it was when I went. But it's different now.
That's so cool. I feel like originally when I created this property, I wanted it to be this big thing, and I still want that. And I think it's really important that it gets to the people who can be impacted by it first, and let them carry the story, throughout wherever it is that they feel called to carry it to. Because I think, especially in Comic-Con, like, I don't think I ever imagined myself going to Comic-Con when I was a kid. And I was so afraid of being a nerd and being made fun of for being a nerd. That I like had comic books and action figures, and I kind of hid all of that.
You're scared of
away.
it. Yeah, I was kind of
oh my gosh,
waving my freak flag, with like I was a Trekkie and a comic book kid. So, I'd go with all the big guys trying to speak Klingon.
Oh my gosh.
and then you got the kids like trying to dress up like the Fantastic Four or the X-Men. And so it was always kind of like, I didn't care. It's like, I'm a nerd, and I had a bunch of nerd kids. I was hanging out with a Polish kid who was like ostracized. I had a Jewish kid that was ostracized. I'm an African-American kid living in the suburbs, and we were all like, hey, we're gonna wear our freak flag high like Hendrix. It's like, who cares?
So you were just like the X-Men. You were the X-Men.
Yeah, we were kind of identified with the X-Men because like everybody I hung out with was in that kind of outside crowd,
Yeah.
So we were like, we were hanging out with kids who were gay, in the 70s, and that wasn't a big thing then. People. So I can understand. It's interesting. I wanted to get into that. Your Lost Children of Andromeda, the write-up indicates that you're kind of using it to, like a lot of science fiction writers do, to kind of represent, like your own journeys as an LGBTQ person of color, but using science fiction, which has been really cool. Because Rod Serling used to use science fictions in the late 50s and 60s to talk about things that normally you couldn't get into primetime.
Yeah.
with the monsters on Main Street and all these, things about racism and sexism and ostracization, all kinds of ideas that were, but you could hide it in science fiction. Star Trek
Yeah.
episodes used to be able to hide racism content, stories that challenge racism as make it some kind of science fiction world where you
Right.
can talk about it. So do you find that that's a good vehicle to kind of, bring up political issues through science fiction and you kind of indirectly take on things?
Yeah, I think one of the things I will say that I was really, really afraid of was like how far I could go, as a first time independent author in terms of identity.
Mm-hmm.
And so having Alistair be kind of a cis male, to everyone's perspective at this point, heterosexual, even though there are things coming, felt safe to me. And I can admit openly that I played it safe with him so that he could be a protagonist that people could come to love and grow with. And I think that that's also been my journey, is that I hid myself a lot behind the norms, things that I thought were norms and like cultural expectations of being a Black man,
Mm-hmm.
so that I could be accepted. And then eventually when I came out, some people didn't take to it very well, but there was no violence. It was just
Yeah.
kind of like distance. And then, and then kind of grew into the people that were really meant to be around me, were able to be around me because I was being my full self, all the time. So I think that with all of the characters, there are ways that I feel I've represented different populations.
Mm-hmm.
And it's somewhat about like physical identity, but it's also about like psychological identity, because there are, what I've observed in people is there are archetypes to our experiences, somewhat, and they're varied within those. But, there's ways that people can be oppressed mentally
Yeah.
in their families, in society, and within themselves. And so exploring those conversations within each character and their evolution through that, I think, is an important part of like reconnecting to ourselves,
Yeah, that's
to
so good.
overcome.
Yeah. One thing that's cool is like I was a sociology major, and so I used to study like Weber and like the idea like microcosm, macrocosm, and
Mm,
concept of anomie, which if you read science fiction, it's full of that.
yeah.
Science fiction's always taken the concept of like anomie and the outsider and like the microcosm and the macrocosm from 1984 to like Animal
Mm-hmm.
Farm to the dystopian pictures of like Fahrenheit 4 54. But you just find all these things that people take like the political world that maybe currently exists and try to create like a fanciful world with those real elements,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
craft it. I've always loved like science fiction or fantasy work, because you can actually make big moral statements
Mm-hmm.
and have it kind of math, like you kind of like African Americans, we always kind of wear, like Francis Fan started said, we have the wretched earth, we have these masks, and we all kind of wear masks in the society, because in the macrocosm we gotta get along to get along. but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
then we really might have a more radical point of view, like the Invisible Man, like the idea that you might have a more radical point of view, but you got to get through it, so you might hide your true self with a mask, and then eventually that might come out, eventually in your life. But
Yeah. Yeah. And I think to add to your point is, it links so closely back, like you were saying, anomie is like, it links so closely back to our belief systems. And so like for example, I'll talk about 2050Z. It will be, I'll say there's something coming soon that is related to getting the story and the property out there that is not a print novel. And I'll be releasing that sometime this fall.
cool.
And I'm super excited about it. I've launched a Patreon to kind of build buzz around it, at Lost Children of Andromeda. And what happened, I think, in 2050Z when I was writing it was, over this last year, was what I kept seeing was this breakdown of like individuals, like social structure and communication, and this lack of trust, general lack of trust within ourselves, and then that manifested with our lack of trust in each other. And we're kind of seeing that play out now.
Oh yeah.
in a much larger way.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me because I want to believe that like that love and trust will be the foundation of like our collective healing and our forward motion. And so anything that kind of breeds mistrust to me makes me a little like I kind of distant. I kind of like, I don't know if I want to, go down that path. And so in 2050Z, it tackles a lot of different things, but a lot of it is about, sense of self, and I think a lot about trust. And it's also a really fun story, about a kid who grows up in like a kind of a rundown suburb that is populated like a city, right outside of the district, which is formerly Washington, D.C., and it's now a military hub, who has these evolutionary abilities and believes that he can stop the countdown clock that's counting down to the apocalypse. So it's kind of like when you wake up and I'm saying to myself, like, hey, I think I can save the world, or maybe I've always believed it, and people kept telling me that I couldn't, or that I didn't look the part, and then I went out and tried to do it anyway, and so that's kind of the journey that that starts Alistair down the path.
So Alistair isn't like a Superman kind of cosmic, super powerful capability. What kind of superhero would he be, or super being? He's not as like at that level, like a Thor, or
oh right.
Could they have this
it's
cosmic
interesting,
level,
yeah.
or do you have someone that's a more, they have limits, to their capability, and so then they have to kind of, it makes it more interesting. If you look at a character like a Spider-Man, Spider-Man is limited. He has strength, and maybe he's as strong as Captain America, but he's not as strong as Thor. He's not Superman. But that makes his character more interesting, and then sometimes he can rise to the occasion and actually exhibit strength that's way beyond what you would think he could do.
Yeah.
Is that kind of like the way your character is going?
Definitely. I mean, it was really a study in like humanity, what our potential is, and like how our mental state or the conditions that we're under affect how well we're able to do those things. And I would compare him to like, he's like, he has like a bishop or a cyclops or, even a Black Panther, or like you said, Spider-Man, where his abilities are genetically infused and they manifest themselves in specific ways. And some of the other characters are ticking more toward cosmic, but generally it's more of that like, I make of it what I can with what I have.
Well, I think that makes the character, more interesting. So I think so many kids in the 60s loved Spider-Man because it wasn't like this rich millionaire like Batman. They can just buy all this stuff and he can do whatever because he can outspend everybody. Or Superman is just like, okay, well, you can't defeat him.
Yeah. Superman is pretty he's pretty powerful. He's very powerful.
It's so cosmic that you're like, okay, they had to give him kryptonite to give him like a weakness. But Marvel tried to come up with a similar level of like having gods like Thor, actual like Norse gods, or the Eternals came in and like, okay, we
love them.
Kirby created like another set of Norse gods. Which he was always interested in, this idea of new gods, that superheroes are actually like demigods.
Yeah.
And he wanted to kind of define them that way, where guys like Ditko and Lee were more like, okay, I want to have limitations and create Peter Parkers or Iron Man's. The original Iron Man had something, a weakness in his heart. He actually had to put shrapnel in his heart, so he had to put the suit on to stay alive.
Yeah.
That was more like a Lee idea, is always to make the guy have something holding him back, kind of tied one hand tied behind your back and then try to do something. Where Kirby, like, you had to give him like amazing superpower, like God level power.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
And yet it was kind of the dichotomy between Kirby and Lee is like, okay, how much are we going to try to weaken these characters or strengthen these characters? And Lee was always trying to weaken them and make them have problems.
Yeah, which I think is beautiful and connective, right? Like if I'm, there are aliens in this story too. And so it's interesting because I kind of toe the line of aliens have problems too.
Yeah.
And that
make them more human, relatable.
Right. And that just because something has lived 600 years doesn't mean it isn't affected by what goes on. So I think I love that. It's true. I feel like at times, I think as a creator, sometimes I find myself favoring my characters to where I don't want them to be in pain. I don't want them to be defeated, and I don't want them to have faced things that are like so much stronger than them. And it's the same comfort level that I probably give to myself. And so it's even more fun when I can create someone or something so diabolical and vicious that like is out for blood, and my character really kind of has to be concerned about their well-being, and that's something that I had been challenging myself to do more, especially in this story, because I didn't feel like previously I'd given enough odds on the opposite side.
Yeah, so on the opposite side, you're not to reveal too much about your character structure, but like in a lot of comics, you had like Galactus, like, he's going to destroy the planet, he's going to eat the planets.
Yeah.
You have Doctor Doom as a diabolical super genius, like the opposite of Reed Richards. Or you get like a Magneto that's just like, he's going to run the other side of the mutants, and they're going to like, okay, we're going to take humanity out before they take us out. So do you have somebody that's kind of like a overall diabolical genius that's like super, controlling, or a collection of evil powers, or maybe a government or social structure that's evil?
It's a little of all of those things. So what I did with 2050Z was kind of start in a manageable place. So it started with, there's a government and institutions, there's organizations, and then there's other rival evolutionaries. And so like that's kind of the conflict that we see play out in 2050Z. As the series goes on, it becomes much more cosmic. I would say it starts out as something between like Harry Potter and X-Men, and grows into something more like Lord of the Rings meets Star Trek, or Game of Thrones meets Star Wars.
So you might have like a power like a Bjork, like a Borg.
Yeah. Where it becomes just like, wow, this is epic. Like it becomes like an epic.
They were like
kind of
galaxy
like intergalactic.
Galaxy crushing power.
Like
the Bjork were like one of the best like Star Trek concepts. Is like, okay, now you actually have this thing that can actually destroy the whole Federation. Not just like the Klingons are going to get into a fight like the Cold War, but beings that are so powerful they're going to take out the whole galaxy.
Yeah, exactly. So it's it'll end up being 7 books at the end. I'm pretty sure it'll still be only 7.
So you mapped it out. You got a whole.
So I mapped it out. Yeah. So I already know the ending. It's like it's a crazy twist, and
in terms of like the sequencing, you're not running like Star Wars where are you running a timeline that's kind of flexible, or you're running like a sequential timeline?
I mean, I guess it depends on how fast it takes me to write the books. I'm learning a lot. I'll say that. I think I learned through the first 2 kind of like versions of the books that I've already written. And this one to me felt like I figured out a good process that works in terms of editing and development that will allow me to produce them faster. So my goal is to have all the books finished by 2025, which means about a book a year. And I believe I can do that. So I'm just going to leave it there.
But I guess my question is, sometimes in science fiction, stories start at the end and then go to the, to the middle, and then go back to the beginning, and then go back to the end.
Oh,
Do you have like time shifting, or are you more sequentially telling a story in that kind of sequential method, or are you using some of the sci-fi techniques of bouncing between, dimensional time, and then having a story take place like a prequel, like
okay. I see what
part
you
of the
mean. I
way
see what
into
you
the
mean.
book where you can go back and like, put light on something that maybe you kind of talked about, and then suddenly it's in the past and you bring it up, and or you shift to the future and then go back. And there's a lot of time shifting in some science fiction, and I was just trying to understand how you were constructing your epic.
It's more linear. I've tried time hopping and I didn't do it that well.
You didn't like it.
It's linear up until a point. And I think the way that I felt about it is that if I can write the first 3 books where kind of you're following the sequence of like this looming apocalypse to the point where they have major contact with this alien force, that after that you're hooked in a way that I can start to bounce between what came before and what's happening now. Yeah. And then I have all of the civilizations have their own history, so I could see what happens before, Alistair even shows up, or with his parents. I could see that playing out as a graphic novel or a mini series or something like that.
Yeah, you could do those sub stories that you could
Yeah.
kind of fill in, because the graphic novel world, sometimes you'll run a sub story.
Yeah,
of a set
exactly.
of characters, and go off and run these characters, go off and have a side mission that somehow interconnects. Like in a Marvel universe or DC universe, they have these big long epics.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Like Infinite Crisis on the Crisis on Infinite Earths, or Marvel had these Civil War, which
oh my god,
these big long epics that are interconnected.
So I have Onslaught is one of my favorite X-Men sagas. I just thought it was like so wild. I loved Onslaught. That came out like I was pretty young, I think, actually. I thought I was older, but maybe I was in my 20s. But I have like the full volume because, oh my god, following that comic story through like Fantastic Four, X-Men, X-Force, Avengers was wild. I have Avengers vs. X-Men. I have Age of Apocalypse. I have Infinity, which was a recent redoing of the Infinity Crisis. Yeah. And I don't know if you heard about King Krull, the new one that's coming out with the King of the Symbiotes that's like dropping in November or something.
Wow.
But that I think is going to be crazy. I saw a video about it. They were talking about like, something's coming, and everyone thinks they're prepared for it, but they're not. So I thought like that was like, oh, another big epic, like kind of like multi-story, multi-level, multi-team.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of grew up like the first 100 issues of the Fantastic Four. When you got to like issue 48, that's when Silver Surfer and Galactus showed up, and then suddenly he introduced like the negative zone, and then all these other ideas, and suddenly the book became kind of like this big long story. Then Kirby left Marvel and created the New Gods, and that where he went to DC and created the New Gods, he actually did what comic books do today. He created the first interlinked multiple series story. He did it in the early 70s with the New Gods. And if you bought like Mr. Miracle and the New Gods and OMAC, you bought all these books, they all interconnected with this big long story.
Yeah.
And people didn't really get it at the time. Now people like see that was a precursor of how all the comic book companies run stuff now. But that's back then, it's like, they didn't do reprints as much. So if you missed an issue, you missed the whole story.
Oh my gosh.
So you could.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So it was like,
I would go crazy.
Yeah. The kids were trying to like, oh shoot, and like get to the newsstand, and like my mother got me there late, and I missed one of the books. And it's like, oh, I'm missing, and I have to try to go to the comic shop. And they just started making comic shops like in 74, 76, and then I would be trying to find it. But now they do them as graphic novels and you can always get it. But back then they didn't do that. And so you you have these big long stories and you miss an issue. You're like, oh, I don't know what's going on.
And that's what happened. I totally got lost in Onslaught. It was so agonizing because I was like, I don't have all the books, but that was one of the first epics that I followed, because Infinity War and the Secret Wars, like the Skull versus Kree, like all of that came kind of before my
Skull Kree War.
awakening. Yeah, that one was a good one too.
That's a good one.
I think I actually got turned on to X-Men through the cartoons and then went into the comics.
Oh,
because
you went to it?
Yeah, the 90s cartoons just like changed my life. I was like, this is the best thing I've ever seen. Like you could not pay me to miss an episode.
They were pretty clear. They were pretty close to the book, because I had been
they were
the Dark Phoenix, saga, the whole Dark. I was like buying those books as they came out.
Yeah.
So I was like, wow, this is unbelievable. And, and then the Teen Titans, DC went and put the Teen Titans, which was like the same thing. Like they realized they needed to do something to match the X-Men, so they created Teen Titans, and then they had this big long story. I'm like, wow, and they had the same kind of dynamics. So it was the first time DC actually stepped up and actually started making their stuff more like what Marvel was doing.
You are clearly a Marvel fan.
Yeah, I'm a big Marvel fan, but then DC started to go in that direction, though. They started to realize when George Perez left the Avengers, he left Marvel and went to DC to give them something like the way when Jack left and gave them the New Gods, he left and gave them the Teen Titans. Then suddenly, wow, DC comic books can actually be more Marvel-esque.
Yeah. You know what I loved? I watched Young Justice all the way through, which I thought was fantastically done. I love the animation and like the storylines there. And I watch a lot of the animated DC movies because I think they're better than the live action ones, but they're unbelievable. Like the
Batmans were like unbelievable. Justice Leagues are good too.
Yeah. I just watched the Apocalypse War and I'm still traumatized. That was like just heart-wrenching to watch. But I think one of the things I loved about the X-Men story, the cartoon, is how directly it confronted issues.
Oh yeah.
I mean, when I go back and look at the clips, it's so in your face. And as a child, I had no idea. But like the protesting, the rioting around mutant rights, and like the way they were doing their president. I know, but that's because no one really knew what they were even talking about. Like no one made the parallel. It was so wild, and it was really. It was an aggressive show.
That's the trick of science fiction. That's what like what Rod Serling was able to do in the late 50s and 60s, with the monsters on Mulberry Street. He's making a statement about he used to make all these really big statements about racism within his show. It's in black and white, but it was science fiction. People didn't get it. The censors didn't stop him because they didn't understand that that's what he was doing, because he would put layers on it. And when you do science fiction like that, you got a cartoon that's doing really deep stuff, but it was in the comic book, and so the people didn't realize their kids were reading stuff that was taking those science fiction elements and not dumbing them down. That was the cool thing about comic books, is it's science fiction, and some people might think it's dumbed down, but it's not.
Yeah, it's so true. That's so true. There's like, I think, my influences a lot were, X-Men was a big influence on me. I didn't really get into DC until I was an adult. I didn't feel like I saw anything in DC that was for me. They weren't outcasts. They were highly recognized and supported and loved.
The whole thing of like Bruce Wayne, the millionaire thing in the Justice League. They got this big. I mean, the Avengers had that too, but the Avengers still had problems. But
I didn't like the Avengers when I was until the movies. I thought they were like cookie cutter. They like goody two shoes. I don't know.
Well, they were kind of like the Justice League because Tony Stark is rich like Bruce Wayne.
Oh, true.
And so then they didn't have as many problems, except for the Hulk, who would cause problems, because he's a monster and he's get out of control. And then it's like, okay, well, how are you going to deal with that? But and then I guess the thing with the Scarlet Witch and Vision, I don't know if they started to get into that, but in the 70s that was like a big deal. The whole idea of this cyborg and a witch having a relationship. And then her powers of being like a witch, and being like, people being scared of her. It's kind of fear thing. That was kind of like the mutant thing. That those issues were kind of cool because they kind of brought a little X-Men vibe into the book.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm always drawn into the story with the outsider,
Yeah. That's the same. And I felt like, one of my really good friends asked me, he was like, "What kind of hero are you?" And I was like, "I don't know." But I realized that knowing that really dictates how I move, because it informs like how I am the hero of my story. So it's really interesting to think about, like, but I'm kind of like that epic journey hero, which I think is why, that's how Alistair shows up too, kind of the underdog.
Yeah, well, we have like like a Lord of the Rings kind of feel where you don't really know everything's kind of just like you're on this journey, and you got to step up, and you don't know if you can step up. You don't know if you really got that capability, but you get drawn into it.
Yeah, and you don't really know what's coming at you. I think that's one of the big differences with. I think that's one of the cool things about, when I think about it from a literature perspective, one of the cool things about the storytelling in like X-Men, and even most recently in Justice League, what was really cool about Apocalypse War was that the Justice League didn't know what was coming at them for one of few times. And as a result, they were completely like ravaged, like completely like destroyed. And I think that with Alistair's journey, and even with my own like creative journey, I set out to do this thing, and I thought I knew what I was doing, and I had no idea what I was doing, what I would face, what I would need to rise to. And it's kind of like every time something shows up, I just like make a choice in that moment. And I think that's because it's just so like our lives. I think that it will be a stronger connection with people that are having to do that right now, which is everyone pretty much.
Well, I think that kind of equates to like in the music industry, if you get a singer-songwriter, right, like a Bob Dylan, you get like a Conor Oberst, you get like a Bruce Springsteen, you get a Marvin Gaye. When somebody is actually like, not taking a song that was written for them, but they're actually the person that wrote it, and they're like a novelist in themselves. They become like music can become like the great American novel. When you look at an artist that has that level of control over their work, you can listen to their work and it seems like you're reading a novel. Like even Taylor Swift's new album, she kind of stepped up with this new release, and she's done an album that's more like an album. It actually is a statement, like a Carole King. It's like, oh yeah, she's actually doing something and revealing something of themselves, and not just trying to get a hit, but actually diving into her psyche and revealing something of themselves. And I think that's always the better artist, creative people can kind of take parts of their lives and take pain and turn it into art.
Yeah. I love that. I love that you mentioned Taylor Swift, because I'm such a huge fan of
hers. Yeah, I mean, her work is always
and
good.
I love the album.
The new album is brilliant.
The album is really amazing. Yeah, it's really
I like
amazing.
the stripped down thing.
Yeah, it's very cool. It's minimal. She doesn't need to be a pop star necessarily. Like the songs that I like about her, the songs that I love the most by her are the ones that are so heartfelt and vulnerable. And
yeah, I knew she had Carole King capability, but she had a bunch of producers that were trying to like overproduce her. And what I liked is that she went with the National, which was more of a singer-songwriter band, and then she got to that indie heart, she's like, she's channeling the kind of alternative nature or indie nature. Kurt Cobain or an Eddie Vedder, they're allowed to get that deep, and pop stars tend to not do that. Except when you go back in the 70s, they did, but but nowadays they tend not to do that. But it's cool that she actually channeled. Really, what I've always told, and I'm a musician and producer, and I'm always telling kids I work with is like, you need to listen to Tapestry. You need to listen to some really deep Hendrix or some deep Dylan. Go listen to Blood on the Tracks, and see what a songwriter does.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Because
really true.
then when you realize what you can do with words, in your song, then you can actually
Yeah.
tell a story. You can evoke emotions. You can get people to feel something. And I think writers like you guys do that too. In the same way we do
Yeah.
it a little, more concise. Little, like a little tiny little novel that is a song. Where you're writing
Yeah.
a novel that's the novel.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and music has always been a huge importance for me. I think the two ways that I escaped the most were music and reading, music and literature. And so I think when I was younger, I liked books a lot, so I didn't read comic books as much, but I just loved getting lost. I mean, I read like all of the, Malin Ingle books. I read a lot of R.L. Stein and things like that, too. And I feel like there's like so much music. I think the one thing that I'm most afraid of, or the one thing that I miss the most when I die, even though I know I won't miss things when I die, is
Yeah.
music. Because I love the feeling that I get when I listen to music, and like from film score to Taylor Swift to like Nicki Minaj, like to Whitney Houston, to The Weekend. Like it kind of goes all over the
Yeah.
place in terms of like
That's
what
cool.
I listen to in particular moments. But I found that more recently, poetry, and then I have a composer that does some of the film score music for the book
Yeah, on
series.
Apple Music, we have
Um,
your link. We're going to promote that. But I listened to that
yeah,
record, and that's cool. It's like, so maybe we can talk about that. Because I know you're short on time.
yeah,
But the Apple Music
yeah.
album you have out there, how does that intersect with the overall project? If somebody didn't know that was out there.
Yeah, I think that sometimes I had a tendency to make things for myself, like that I just wanted, which I think happens a lot when you're a
Mm-hmm.
creator, right? You're just like, I like listening to film score music, so I want some. And I'm a very like things person. I'm a Taurus. I want things, physical things that I can own. And so when after this composer Toby out of Germany um, did the score uh, for my animation
Mm-hmm.
trailer, I was so in love with that song
Oh, you
that I
expanded
was
it to
like,
a full
oh my
record.
gosh. I was like, oh my God, let's do a whole album. And so he read the whole book, and then he basically
Interpreted the book.
interpreted the book through music. So we used excerpts from the book to kind of anchor the
So like a John
stories.
Williams
And they're,
soundtrack.
yeah, and they're more
Yeah.
thematic, the
Yeah.
excerpts, and then kind of the sounds come in. So he kind of gave each character their own sounds, and you can hear how they
Well, I
intertwine
like
in
that idea
conflict and
because
things
I'm a
like
big
that.
fan of rock opera from like Tommy and Quadrophenia, like Pink Floyd. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
progressive like musician, and I'm a keyboard player. I play like Moogs. I play like Jupiter eights and
Mm.
stuff. So
Yeah,
like when I saw what you did there, I said, wow, that's like a rock opera. You know, that's
yeah,
like
yeah,
Styx.
yeah.
It's like Kansas. It's like what the '70s. All these '70s bands used to do that. They used to make these things. Genesis, like The Lamb Lies on Broadway.
Yeah, yeah,
Peter
yeah.
Gabriel Genesis. They were nothing but rock operas, and it was very sci-fi oriented. Um, and so yeah, I think that fits. A lot of Yes was very sci-fi oriented. In a lot of their big soundscapes, and I felt that in that project. So that's cool.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, so that was more of a, to me that was like an expensive test. And I enjoyed, I still listen to the soundtrack all the time. I listen to it when I write. I enjoyed creating it, and I'm excited to create something, for 2050Z that follows,
What are you gonna do? You gonna do the
kind
same
of
thing?
a
You gonna do the
larger.
same thing?
It'll be no, it'll be different. It'll be different. It'll be different. It'll be actually pretty different. And so I'm looking forward to it. It'll be longer. The songs will be longer, more like a true album. And I can see there being some integration in terms of like different styles of music, so that it's more of a
Okay.
story. Because
So real rock opera,
it
rock
felt like,
opera.
yeah, yeah, because Zazma felt really epic, a lot of, and I think Zosma is that is that as a story, it is more epic because it is moving into this like kind of big world cosmic type like
That's
conversation
definitely
action and
my
things like
thing. I
that.
love that. Yeah, keep that
Yeah.
coming. I'm always like drawn to that. I've always been drawn to that. You know, I'm working on some rock operas right now, but
Yeah, yeah, and I think that I could also we will expand Zosma as well. Um, you know, and next year coming back around to like a secondary like push, and with 2050Z, it's very much like navigating a world about to end. So there's a lot of movement. Like one thing that I really love was that you is that I one thing that I loved about the world is traveling and experiencing different
mm-hmm.
places. And so everything kind of happens in different places. So like in 2050Z, they go to, there's the district, which is like completely different from, you know, completely different from what it looks like now. And then there's, you know, there's De Los Muertos, which is what LA was before the massive earthquake. There's London Sky City, which is the floating city of London in the sky because most of the islands are underwater. So there's all these different like places that they get to travel, and because of that, they have their own like style of like their own vibe, and the characters um, that are in those places are kind of not always the same. So I think the music will be like a nice story flow. I think it'll be about like 14 songs because there's 14 chapters. So it'll be about 14 songs, and maybe do some excerpts in between,
Would there be any
or some
music
like
videos to
small.
go with it?
I would love to create music videos. I think they would have to be animation, and so
Maybe
I
like
don't.
anime. Like I'm a big fan of
Yeah, like
Japanese
anime.
anime, and I did
Yeah.
kind of
Oh, yeah.
feel that your work could definitely go in an anime direction. You know, that if you took your work, you could actually do it like, you know, like a big anime, like Akira or something.
Yeah. Oh my god, that would be amazing.
I could see
I
a
put that.
Japanese animation company wanting to like, oh, we could take this and turn this into a series.
So, did you watch Castlevania?
Yeah.
Ugh, I want like that, and also League of Legends has really amazing animated shorts. Um, so anything like in the vein of like League of Legends or Castlevania, I would be
Yeah,
like over the
definitely.
moon. It's one of my goals on
Is to
Patreon,
do
so
that.
hopefully I get
Yeah.
to that earning amount and then I can
But
do
like
it. It's very
Attack on
expensive.
Titan is a big favorite. I like that one, but
Oh, really? Okay, I'm gonna
yeah,
check that
that's
one
a
out.
kind of dystopian type of thing.
Yeah.
But I've always been into, you know, classic anime. You know, one of the things I was always into is this Japanese anime called Gotcha Man, that was created by the guy who created Speed Racer. In the U.S., it's known as Battle of the Planets, but the original Japanese is actually a Japanese superhero group, and they have over like, I lived in Japan for 2 years, from 2004 to 2006, doing some work that I do in IT work. But the American version, they edited it, and they took like 15 minutes out of every episode, so you didn't really get the full story. But it's like a
Okay.
200 episode like big long anime series, one of the first ones to actually be multi-episode from the 70s, and it's a Japanese superhero team that are like cybernetic mutants. They can all come together and create a phoenix. They fly in this
Oh wow.
plane, and they can actually transmute and become a phoenix. And they're fighting these like aliens from this world called Galactor, and the aliens are trying to take over the whole planet and steal resources because their planet died. And so the whole story is that they're trying to corrupt all Earth organizations, and then steal resources, and take over the planet. And they hide as like politicians, they hide as like movie stars, they hide as like regular people, and then they corrupt organizations. It's very science fiction. Look, it was really cool, and I was always drawn to it because the guy who did Speed Racer, he suddenly did this thing that wasn't funny. It was actually this story, and it's the same guy that did it.
Wow.
And I always said, well, this is better than Speed Racer, but most Americans only know Speed Racer.
Yeah. Oh, a Speed Racer. So it's funny. I know what Speed Racer is, but I didn't watch it because it was funny. Like
Yeah,
it wasn't. It was like
yeah.
wasn't serious and epic
Gotcha
enough for
Man
me, and
is,
there was no
yeah, Gotcha
superpowers.
Man's serious.
Wow. Same
Yeah, it's the
style
same
too as
art
Speed
style. It's the
Racer.
same guy.
Yeah. Same art
Yeah.
style. Okay, that's awesome. That's really
Tatsunoko
cool.
was the guy, is a Japanese guy, and he actually has a bunch of superhero characters he created um, outside of Speed Racer, and they were super popular in Japan. And they did come over and Battle of the Planets, but they heavily edited it. And now you can
Okay.
actually get the full series on DVD and stuff. You can get it, and it was on like Apple for a while as a TV. Like
Yeah.
four
Oh, really?
seasons of it were on Apple. But yeah, that art style I think would be really cool. If you ever watched it, I think it's kind of 70s, but it's kind of got this science fiction vibe to it. I like a lot.
Yeah, there's something I kind of love about this like retro stuff. So one of my other really good friends he's a librarian, and he has all these like old books or like rare books, and there were these like graphic um big books that show graphic design styles over the
Oh wow, that
decades.
sounds cool.
It's amazing. And one of the ones that I saw was either between 1900s and 1950 or something like that, but around the era, like the way that like the comic style was so similar to the marketing
Mm-hmm.
style, and like the way that, and I kind of wish I had seen that before I started doing this series,
Okay, maybe you want
because
to
I
change your
think
style,
I might have gone
more
more of that
retro.
like vintage style. Yeah. But I think that I'm kind of going a little bit, it's a little bit cyberpunk sci-fi-ish
Well,
right
you could have
now.
gone like Flash Gordon,
Um,
kind of Metropolis, old
yeah,
like 30s
yeah,
version of science fiction.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So I'm kind of in that like uh, retro kind of dystopian cyberpunk realm. I think the music will look
yeah,
like
that's
that.
cool. That's a
That's
good
kind of
vibe.
where the artwork I think is leaning. And thank you. And I think that, but the anime style could be really cool if it was something like like something that hasn't been done in a
Yeah,
while,
we want to look at the
or kind of a blending of
Tatsunoko art style
styles.
is really cool. It's probably I think
Yeah.
of it as some of the best anime ever done. And if you looked at Speed Racer, it had really good style, but it was too funny. But the Gotcha Man series, and then he had another one that was really dystopian. Basically, this kid becomes a robot. He dies and
Mm,
has to get transformed into a robot body, and then his dog died too, and then it becomes a robot, and then they have to fight this like evil robot that's trying to become like a fascist. He's a fascist. It's a robot, and he's a
mm-hmm.
fascist, and he's trying to take over the world like Stalin. And it's very dystopian, and it's got the same kind of art as Gotcha Man, and it's like, wow, that's crazy. Um,
Wow.
Anything that Tatsunoko did is really cool, and it's not widely known, so it'd be cool to look at it, and not a lot of people would like maybe know about it.
Oh, yeah.
So
True.
it, but it
True.
will give
True.
you like a different art style. People would probably think it's unique, you know?
Yeah. They're like, yeah, I've never seen this before. This looks
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah, I think I have like my imaginary timeline, and I'm also, looking to, the thing about it is that in a lot of times with studios and things, they are the ones making the investment or kind of like vouching
Yeah.
for the viability of a property. And so it's kind of an interesting space to be in, where I'm like asking someone to see the potential in it and see what I've done and take it to the next
I see
level.
it. I do
Um,
see it what you're doing. I think it could definitely go that anime route. Depends
yeah,
on what style you
yeah,
want to go with. If it's like a Bleach style or Naruto, but that's already out there. So
mm,
I kind of go backwards.
yeah,
Or maybe
exactly.
like a
You have to
Cowboy
keep.
Bebop style. I don't know if you ever seen Cowboy Bebop.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
that
yeah,
to me,
yeah,
the
yeah,
Watanabe,
yeah.
his style was like Samurai Champloo, uh, you know
Mm-hmm.
Space Dandy. His work is very unique in the anime. It's not like the typical anime. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
anything that Watanabe touches or Tatsunoko, those are the guys I've kind of been really into, kind of retro.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much. Um, yeah, I think any way that can bring like a kind of a unique take. And
there's always new
and
studios coming up with, you might be able to give it like Trigger or something.
Yeah.
Trigger has a
Exactly.
really good art style, and they seem to be like the most cutting edge group right now. So yeah, if you could get something on Trigger, that'd be cool.
Yeah. I'm exploring all avenues. I am very excited. I'm very excited. Should have a final version of 2050Z by September, and then it's like full steam ahead.
Maybe
so
we could have you come back
on
then, and we'll talk about it. Because I always have people come back on the show. Like when I have a band come on and they've got a record, we have like a record release show.
Oh yeah, I'll send you a copy once it's done, so you can read it, and then we can have we can talk about it.
I've got an in-depth show about your work, which would be really cool.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. That'd be really awesome. Oh man.
Yeah, so I know we're kind of getting toward the end of the time that we have, but yeah, this has been a really cool thing. I love the podcast form. I've been doing this since 2016 on Spearman, and then I moved to Anchor. We just started doing video podcasts, so maybe when we do the next time, we could do the video.
Oh yeah,
definitely. So we just started doing that. But there's sometimes like the problem is I can have the best mic, but if the person I'm interviewing doesn't have a good mic, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Oh no, I got a really good mic. I don't remember what the brand's called, but it's amazing.
So that would be a good one.
Yeah.
That's always been the limitation. I'm always telling people, do you have a USB mic? Do you have good Wi-Fi? You have a stable system. When I do the audio podcast, it's not as important as the video, but for synchronization and stuff like that. But yeah, this has been great. This is going to go out on 11 podcast platforms, including Spotify, which we're part of. Anchor is actually part of Spotify. And it will be on Apple. It'll be on Radio Public, Overcast, Google Play, many, many more. We'll give you the top 3 links for Apple, Spotify, and Anchor. And we're also going to promote on our Blogger, on GoDaddy, and also our Instagram page.
Okay, awesome. Yes, I will promote on my Instagram personal as well, and my Facebook and my LinkedIn and
And the cool thing for your fans to know is the Spotify. There's a linkage between Instagram and Spotify. So when we create the highlight, it will go right to the Spotify podcast version of the episode.
Oh, amazing!
Like a direct linkage. So somebody, if they see it advertised as a highlight, they hit it and it'll go right to the Spotify version. That will be within the next hour or two. I will get that up.
Okay, awesome. So this comes out
tonight.
Tonight.
The Anchor version will be available within the next half hour. The Apple and Spotify versions have to migrate, and then YouTube takes a day. But yeah, we'll give you the top links. The Anchor link will come first, and the other ones will come within the next couple hours. And YouTube always takes a day to get through their system.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It was wonderful talking with you, and I'm looking forward to continuing to, keep in touch and hang out.
Yeah, it was great.
Virtually.
It's awesome. I love talking to creative people. I'm always working on stuff. So, yeah, we'll see where we can do stuff. I'm always putting stuff down. I'm writing crazy. I'm doing like 3 albums. I got a deal with our Swedish record label, and I just got a write up. That somebody compared some of my music to Trent Reznor, which is cool, which I was going for.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Somebody actually name checks like Pretty Hate Machine, and I didn't know if they would do that, but when they do, that's cool.
Yeah, definitely. It's like beautiful to be seen.
Yeah, especially when you're trying to go for a vibe
in all the ways,
and they actually pick up the vibe you were going for.
Yeah, that means that means your channeling is strong. You are connected to yourself, and like your vision is very clear.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being on, Jason. We're gonna get this out there, and we have all the hyperlinks you gave me will be on the episode, so people will check out your work.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you.
Have a great night.
Have a great weekend. You too. Bye.